Hey friends, Devin here with Backcountry Exposure. Today I am joined by Steve Evans from Suluk46. I think I'm saying that right. Am I saying that right, Steve?
It's close enough.
Close enough. I like it. I'm going to ask you about the name here in a minute. But Steve is a mastermind of some really interesting ultralight gear that is a bit out of the norm from what you might think is like the traditional ultralight backpacking gear. So he and we're going to sit down today. We're going to have a discussion about his company, the products that he's making, but I'm also very interested in digging into a lot of adventure talk because what originally drew me to you, Steve, is I found your YouTube channel. And it wasn't until you connected with me on Instagram, super random, then you were like, "Hey, I also make gear." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, the stars aligned." And I know I know who this guy is. Like I'd seen the name before and everything. So it all came together, but you've been on some epic, really, really cool adventures, particularly around pack rafting, which is of interest to me because I just bought my first pack raft this year. So that's going to be kind of the basis of our chat today, which I'm really excited about it. But Steve, thanks for being here, for taking time and coming back on after some technical difficulties last week.
Thank you very much for having me, Devin. I appreciate it. And yeah, probably all your viewers are wondering what happened. We had a detrimental laptop failure on my end that caused us to delay this by a week.
Okay, let's lead off with this question. Suluk, how do you pronounce it?
So actually it can be pronounced a number of different ways because
Okay.
it's an Inuit word, right? So these are the
Okay.
First
Okay.
Nations Indigenous of Canada, and it's Sioux, like the name, like a female named Sue, and then look, like you're looking at something. So Suluk, and it's generally the languages of the Western Arctic. It means feather.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then where does the 46 fit
And then the
in
40,
that?
yep, the 46 is the line of latitude across I call it a mountain in Ontario, but for you guys that have actual real mountains, it's like maybe 1,500 feet, called Silver Peak. It's sort of
Okay.
where I grew up. I think a lot of people in my position and your position, you grow up kind of camping with your dad or your parents, and he used to take me to Killarney Provincial Park in Northern Ontario, and there was a peak there called Silver Peak that I fell in love with and I dreamed of climbing as a kid. And
Mm.
when I looked, the 46 runs right across it. So when I was putting the company name together in, I think it was 2008, I don't remember my thought process, but somehow I wanted it to be, like in my mind, the Inuit are like the true ultralighters, living off the land, what's required, very, very strong, backcountry ethics and adventures and surviving up there. So
Hmm.
feather, stuff is featherlight, and then something personal, 46. And then it's kind of an odd name, but then a friend of mine's a graphic artist and put together a really cool logo. And I said, okay, let's stick with it. I didn't know what I was doing.
So you're in the Toronto area, right?
I am. Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Geography wise, it's a paddler's paradise. That's really what Ontario is. Like, I know that you're a backpacker, and I
Hmm.
kind of grew up mid 2000s, all for a decade or 15 years, like ultralight backpacking every trail that I could possibly do. 5 pound base weight back in the day when I was kind of going a little bit crazy. Now I've creeped up a bit to something a little bit more reasonable. But in my youth, with my dad, I was paddling. It was mostly a canoeing, like backcountry person
Okay.
for 20 years, and it wasn't until you start getting a little bit older, it starts becoming more difficult to find partners to canoe with or something like
Hmm.
that. And for some reason, solo canoeing didn't really resonate with me for whatever reason, and so I started backpacking, and that's so I predominantly backpacked for the past 15, 20 years, sort of thing. And then pack rafting and mountain biking is kind of newer in the last 5 to 10 years.
Gotcha. Well, and you're doing all sorts of, we can touch on this later because
Yeah.
I've never seen somebody do what you're doing. I'm not going to give it away, but it has to do with bikes and railways. We'll just say that. And
Yeah.
it's very, very intriguing. And I think it just ties into this whole engineering aspect of how you function in your brain of creating
Totally.
really, really interesting products. So I guess before we talk about the gear that you're creating, you do come from an engineering background, right?
Yes, I'm a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you work in that field for a long time, and do you still work in that, or is like this your full-time thing now and takes all your energy?
So right now, it is my full-time thing. It's been my full-time thing for a few years, let's call it. But when I initially not launched the company in 2008, I was working full-time. Actually, I don't remember who I was working for at the time. That's how long ago it was. But certainly had a 9 to 5 as a mechanical engineer. And my background was the design of automation systems. So I would design, I always give people the example. If you ever seen the show How It's Made, and there's
Yeah.
like a bunch of like robots with like grippers picking things up and assembling them and like welding a car and then paint booth and whatever else it is. So I did a lot of automation lines. So someone brings a product to you and they need 100,000 of them a week. You would
Hmm.
actually design a gigantic system to like stamp and cut and all this stuff. And I did that for the automotive industry for many, many years. And then I transferred over to the nuclear industry and I worked
Okay.
predominantly on nuclear automation for the nuclear industry and did Suluk46 sort of on in the evenings and on the weekends. And probably a good story that a lot of, I guess, entrepreneurs have. I didn't have a plan ever to do it. It was more like I was a backpacker. I'm an engineer. I like making stuff. And then eventually you see your effort, or your time and I guess your income from your side project kind of creeping up to where
Hmm.
your daytime is, and then you just decide to make the transition over one day.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind
Yeah,
of where I'm at with my
totally.
transition. Yeah.
Yeah,
In a
yeah,
different
totally.
way. Mine's like YouTube creator, doing that full time, reviewing gear, testing it and such. So it's not in the same vein, but I can relate in the sense that I got really interested in learning how to sew back in like, I think it was 2017, 2018, and even had started a company, which that's a whole other story of what happened with that. Um, anyway, but that's business, right? Things
Yeah,
happen. You think you're going to be on top of the world, and then somebody rains on your parade, and now I don't have that business anymore. But that idea of like, oh, I can take this trade skill that I have and turn it into something that can support my livelihood, which I think is really cool. That we as humans have the ability to like take a passion, take a skill, and then create something that makes it possible for other people to enjoy using whatever product we create based off of those experiences.
I, I do see actually a lot of similarities, like launching a business to, because you are essentially launching a business by going full time on YouTube.
Hmm.
And if it was anything like me, so I have a YouTube channel, but I certainly don't focus on it enough or make any real money out of it. But you've got a full-time job that's paying you, and then you're kind of doing your best to fill in evenings and weekends, let's say to build your YouTube channel, but you're probably not spending the right amount of time on that channel because you're pulled between your full-time job
Hmm.
and whatever else is you have going on in your life. And that was very much the same as me. I mean, if you really followed the business, there was like we had products, but they were relatively simple products and stuff like that. And then when the transition happened, to focus a little bit more on the engineering and building out the business, whatever it was 8, 9 years ago, you can see that once you start putting effort into something that you essentially love and you love backpacking and all the gear and YouTube, like you suddenly are like, oh, I probably should have done this years ago.
Yeah.
The only challenge is you getting a paycheck full time. You're doing this on the side, and then suddenly one just completely drops off. So at one point, almost have like you're rich. You
Right.
you have like a double salary at some point where anything that you made with your YouTube channel or Suluk46 when I was working was just bonus money, and
Yeah.
now you're actually okay. I got to run this real. but with the added time that you can put into the business and the passion, um, I think for if you've got the right, mindset and work ethic, you can make it work. Like I certainly know that I thought about going full time a long time ago and never did just because I was, I guess, scared or nervous. I think that's pretty normal. And
Hmm.
then, it wasn't until I was really, really ready that I did.
Yeah.
And now all I
And
can think about mine is I should have done this 10 years ago.
right. And I
Yeah.
wonder how many people in the cottage industry specifically, just in the outdoor space of all the cottage companies, like you look at garage grown gear, for example, they're adding new products all the time. And I find it fascinating that how many people are kind of on that like up and up breakthrough, waiting for that moment to just happen where like something just clicks. And now, because of the way that this industry functions, which I want to get into like your first products and stuff, but the way the industry functions is we're so supportive of these cottage makers and wanting them to succeed because so many of our problems, problems that we have as backpackers, have been solved by people who have been out having experiences and then they're able to create a business out of it. And I find that just absolutely fascinating that this hobby, this sport, whatever you want to call it, provides that opportunity and then it can create livelihood opportunities for people like yourself to like keep running a passion and driving that, but also support other people in their passion as well. I think it's amazing.
I certainly, if it's actually funny, when I first started like my website and all that stuff, I had a single product, which we can kind of touch on, but I had this adventure section in my YouTube channel. I have the oldest YouTube channel in the world. If you go to my YouTube channel, look at the first video, I think it's from 2009 or 2008 or something. And it's brutal. Like it's just terrible, but I leave it up there because I feel like it's a rite of passage,
Yeah.
Like,
Nice.
and the first, I don't know how I used to do, a couple of this was before YouTube was even like a thing. I didn't even know about monetization and all that stuff. But the first couple years, all I was doing was making videos on how to do a specific trail. That's really all I did. If you look, or a really innovative piece of equipment that I would get custom made.
Hmm.
That's really all I ever did. So now, um, I actually solely focus on cottage brand gear for my own personal gear. And the website that I have that used to have these YouTube videos, and now it does. They're a little bit bigger production, I guess, and I learned how to edit a little bit better. There's gear lists on each of the trips that I've ever done, and if you look, it's basically an entire gear list of brands that you certainly would have heard of them, and probably a lot of your viewers, but anybody not
Yeah.
in the, that industry, would have just no clue, where all this stuff is.
Yeah.
So it's really neat.
It's like tapping into a well of, and I think this probably happens with anybody that like finds the ultralight community, if you
Oh
want to,
yeah.
if you put it in that sense. Because I remember for me, I think it was 2016, somewhere around there, 2017, that I'm like, whoa, there's this entire like huge, massive people that are making really cool gear items that you'll never find at REI, you'll never find it any of like just the big outdoor retailers because scale, right? And the
Mhm.
ability to produce it at a rate that would be viable for a company to function in that realm. But I'm kind of like going on a tangent here, but yeah, it's a well of awesomeness, if you want to put it that way.
I'll give so in a really neat story so I was about when my let's say journey into the ultralight. It was a little bit before 2016 because I'm much older than you, but it was mid 2000s. I was backpacking. Kind of we have an REI up here called Mountain Equipment Company now.
Hmm.
So it's MEC. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's
Yeah, yeah,
it's like their count. I don't even they're not affiliated, but they're basically the same kind of place, big retailer. And I would just go in there and buy some stuff. I didn't even think about weighing gear or anything like that. there's a really cool trail up here called the La Cloche Silhouette Trail, and it's in Killarney Provincial Park. And actually, it passes by Silver Peak, which is the number 46 in Suluk46. And it was my dream to hike the entire thing. It's about 100 kilometers. Takes like, anywhere from, they say, 7 to 10 days.
Hmm.
So I went to go and hike it, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but after about 2 days, I was like, this isn't going to work. It's not going to happen. And I bailed out to road, a hitchhiked back to my car, and kind of went home and was like, it's just so hard for me to carry this bag. And at the time, I think I had an axe. You know what I mean? Like it was like
Nice.
I had just so much stuff. It was just
Yeah.
crazy. And I went online and I found Backpacking Light. This would have been in 2006 or 2007. And Ryan Jordan, it was smaller then. There was all these people kind of posting on the forums, and it melted my mind that you could go backpacking with, I had 75 pounds a year at the time. It was like I was going to climb Denali or something like that. Like
Yeah.
it was just so crazy. And I remember putting together a gear list, and relatively cost effective as well. Like, I wasn't buying any like DCF or Cuban, it was called Cuban fiber back then.
Right.
Making a lot of your gear just like little alcohol stoves. And I remember with all my food, I was at like 22 pounds, and I ripped through that trail in like 4 days. And I
Nice.
thought, wow, this is amazing. Like I can do this.
Game
Yeah.
changer, as you could say.
Yeah. Changed my life. Like, I mean, I went from, doing like 7 to 9 miles a day to literally doing, 20, 25 mile days back in the day. Now I'm not sure if I could do that.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Fair
that was
enough.
great. Yeah, it was great.
You could do that in a boat, though, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. A little bit easier
A little bit
with a lot
easier.
more weight. Yeah.
So, what was the experience or the moment that, I guess you could say, the aha moment where, because you had that experience of really lightening your backpack and such, but what was the aha moment for the first or couple of Suluk 46 products, and what were those products?
Yeah. Okay. So this is the way that it kind of happened. Back then, in the, let's call it later 2000s, 2006, 2007, forums were really big.
Hmm.
So it wasn't so much sharing on. I don't even remember if like Instagram was around. To be honest, I was so disconnected from it. But if you wanted to see what people were kind of like fiddling with, you'd go to the Make Your Own Gear forums
Yeah.
or White Blaze and stuff like that. And I'm sure they're still around. I'm just not as active as I used to be. And as I was finding these small cottage niche products, I was realizing that a whole bunch of the people making them were just making them in their basement sort of thing, and kind of had a website, would sell 20 a week or something like that. And
Hmm.
at the time, I had a small shop. So I was working, but I had a small shop. It was in my mom's basement, actually, and partially in the garage, because I used to work on like dune buggies and old cars and stuff.
Okay.
And I was like, I have a background in engineering, and I was looking at like getting a little bit more deeper. I think it's a process. You find out about the ultralight community, then you dig deep, you lean way into it. You know what I mean? You cut all the weight out. You've got a toothbrush this big, and you're sleeping on the ground without a mat. And then you kind of add some stuff back into it.
Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, I'm going to play around. So for probably a year or so, I was quite active on those forums, creating stuff. I mean, even if you go back and look at the posts, I mean, it would be hard to dig through and find them, but you'll just see me. I made a wood burning stove out of an old apple juice container. I did all this kind of stuff, and I was doing a lot of mountaineering then, and climbing. And I was going to Nepal. I think it was 2008, and we were going to be doing some bigger snowfields where I felt that like a certified ice axe, like a B-rated ice axe, was just going to be overkill. Some people were saying just use a hiking pole. So
Hmm.
oftentimes, with low angle, you could get away with hiking pole. I mean, it's totally normal. It's relatively safe. And I was like, well, I'd rather just have a hiking pole ice axe kind of thing. And there wasn't really anything on the market. So in the forums on Backpacking Light, I had asked the question, does anybody make like an ultralight ice axe, that one that isn't like just, a pound or whatever it was? And a whole bunch of people were interested in it. And somehow over the course of a week or two of discussing with a bunch of people on the forums, actually, I
Hmm.
was like, okay, I'm gonna make my own. I'm gonna see if I make one. So I remember I made a
Okay.
rough prototype out of aluminum, and then a couple people in the forums. You'd be surprised at who is a backpacker, and so then there was someone who was quite knowledgeable with titanium at the time and sent me a note. There was also a gentleman named Kevin, and he worked at a very large carbon fiber company in California. He was their
Interesting.
R&D engineer, and he
Okay.
sent me a note and said, I want to be involved in this project. I'm going to make the carbon fiber shafts for you if you make me two ice axes. That's what he wanted. And I would have, now that I know enough about the process, that would have cost me probably like $25,000 to get custom, like, carbon fiber shafts
Just
made.
the molds alone for carbon
Yeah.
fiber. Yeah.
And so for whatever reason, he was just as active as me and you in the communities, or as passionate. And he was like, I want to be part of this. So I ended up making one. I made actually a couple. I wrote an article for Backpacking Light actually, and then a whole bunch of people wanted one. And I kind of think this is similar to Kickstarter before it was Kickstarter. So a bunch of people were just like, I want one, I want one. I think I got something around like 30 orders just in the forums. So I said, okay, cool. I'll make 50 of them or something like that.
Hmm.
So I made 50, and they all sold. And then people were asking me, like they kept asking, can we do it? And I said, I don't even know how to like set this up. So I told my wife, maybe we'll set up a website. I'll put these ice axes up on here, and we'll make, 50 every 6 months or something like that. And I remember telling her, I said, if we can make a couple $1,000 a year, like $2,000 a year, we can go on a free vacation. That's kind of what I told her. That was the business plan in 2007 or 2008. And
Nice.
then yeah, and if you look over the years, so then that it's called the Teak Ice Tool. It's titanium carbon fiber ice tool. I still make it now. It's changed quite a bit over the years, and I'm actually redesigning it right now. But it won Gear of the Year award in, like, I can't remember, 2012 or something like that. It was making its rounds.
Wow.
And then
That's awesome.
I wouldn't remember what my second product was, but it basically just built off that, where I kind of, it was gear that I personally wanted, and I had some equipment, and if I could make it, I would make it, and then I would sell it. And product after product, that's how it was. And now we have 40, 42 or 43. I can't remember.
And when I look at your products, some of it is like pretty geared towards, like I was saying earlier in the intro, kind of like the traditional ultralight kind of person, but not necessarily like a through hiker. Like I don't look at your products and go, well, that is going to be something a through hiker uses, but more just like a very adventurous person that doesn't want to carry a bunch of weight. So like for example, the silky saws are super popular, right? Granted, they were designed and built as like a landscaping tool. They weren't Silky didn't make it as like a backpacking tool, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very effective way to process firewood. And so many of us like to process firewood, but you built upon that whole concept, right? So what did you create?
So I think the business has definitely evolved over the years. Um, there was a time, if you go, if I think it's called like Wayback Machine or something like that internet thing, you can look at like the website. I used to
Oh, okay.
have probably ten products that were, like a an 8 gram Esbit stove. Actually, I still have a little Tiblet one that I sell, but everything was very much just pared down to the bare minimum, focused really on, like through hiker type stuff. But over the years, I just realized like where my strengths are, like
Hmm.
personally. So I'm an engineer, and I'm able to take what I think is a product that a through hiker or traditional backpacker wouldn't bring because it's too heavy, and I can engineer the living heck out of it to make it a weight that you would bring with you.
That you would want to
And
carry that.
yeah, that you would want to carry. So
Like
the
those
reality
super
is,
tiny little pot grippers.
yeah, the super tiny pot gripper was never supposed to be a product. It was my own product for me. And I don't remember how it actually became so popular because it is quite popular. Um, but I was, I had it in some videos, so I still make trip videos, nowhere near what I used to do. But a few times a year, I'll make a video and I show some of the stuff that I'm working on. People ask for it, and I roll it into a product. That's the same as I I think you might have the. Do you have the old Bucka Saw? My. Do you have one? I don't remember if I ever sent you
Yeah, I've
the
got
Bucka
the
Saw, the
yeah,
folding
the
one.
red one with the
Yeah,
black wrap handle and stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, we'll get you one of the new Yuka 240s are amazing compared to that. But that's same. I was out. So I'm on my trips out in Ontario. Ontario is also a little bit different than a lot of the states because we have an abundance of forest. You're basically going through forest constantly, and it's very remote. And so forest fires are very common. Sorry, not forest fires. Campfires are very common. They'll have established campfire rings. Obviously, you don't cut down like live trees or anything, but there's tons of fallen wood. You cut it up and have a fire. And there was not a saw on the market that, as a backpacker, I was willing to carry. I was not going to carry even a 1 pound or and certainly not a 2 pound saw. I would rather just
Hmm.
break stuff with my foot. So then I went and I designed the one that you have, which I think is about 4.5 ounces or something, which is the
Yeah,
lightest 12-inch
it's
buck saw.
crazy light, and it's
Crazy light.
very efficient. It's very efficient.
It
Like
it worked.
I
Yeah. It's
I like
certainly
it a
not
lot.
for a cottage or a car camping trip, but for someone who would love to bring a saw, but just would not ever reasonably bring a heavier one. That's what I designed it for, and I used that saw for 2 years before releasing it. And I only released it because everybody asked for it. I would show it.
Hmm.
I post pictures on my Instagram, the stuff that I'm working on, all that. And so if you look at like between the saws, some of the tables, the grills that I have in my carbon fiber tube, even my tent stakes and stuff, they're really focused. They're almost like semi luxury items that are so light that you could bring them with you, but perhaps not a true through hiker like on the CDT or the Appalachian Trail.
Sure,
You know,
sure.
that's really going kind of. I don't even know if you can have fires on the Appalachian Trail, to be honest. I don't even know the rules, or maybe some
I've
areas you
never
can.
hiked it, so I don't know what the rules are. But out
Yeah.
here in the West, like as long as you're not too close to fire season and there's not a bunch of fire bans and stuff, then yeah, you can have fires. Or if you're like, I like to hot tent,
Mhm.
spend a few nights each winter in a hot tent. You have to process a pretty significant amount of wood for those tiny titanium stoves to burn. Like it's more wood than you think you need. So having there's another brand, like a buck saw that I've got that's also really nice, but it's a bit bulky, it's heavy, and it's not as enjoyable. And so the one that you do, you still sell that one, or is
Oh
it
yeah.
been just okay? Okay.
Yeah, we still
Um,
sell it. Sorry, there's definitely a camp of people that do not enjoy the pull saw, like a silky style blade.
sure,
They want a traditional buck saw, so we offer
because they
that
want
12
the
inch, and
forward and back cutting action.
the cost of the blade. A silky blade MSRP is like $50, 50 US dollars.
Hmm.
You can buy a 12-inch buck saw blade or bow saw, whatever you want to call it, for $5 at your
Right.
local hardware store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super cheap.
There's a company up here. They're actually right down the street from us called Agua Gear, and they make.
Yes, that's the saw that I've got.
Oh, so I actually know those guys personally,
Yeah.
Brad and Graham. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
they're they're not far from me, and so they'll have a booth at the same trade show booths that or same trade shows that I'll be at, and it's a different product. I actually have the Boreal 24 for like
Yeah.
which is like your viewers are going to be like, what?
It's huge.
Like it's
It's
a
huge. And
for winter.
I have their 15-inch,
Yeah.
and I wish I had got the slightly larger, just because it doesn't give quite for how much saw there is. It doesn't give me as much cutting power as I want
Mhm.
for like how big it is, if that makes sense. It's still a really great saw. Like I really don't have anything bad to say about it, but I found myself using yours more often because there's it's lighter weight, but it's almost the exact same like cutting area that
Yeah.
I can do with it, if that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah. They're, I mean, their focus, that's just it. There is no, through hikers or backpackers that would consider carrying a big heavy saw. I use my mine for like canoe camping, or I have a
Hmm.
hot tent as well. I go hot tenting. It's fantastic. Or short hikes is great too. But if you're really traveling some serious miles, you'll sacrifice the length and wait for something a little bit smaller. But great product, and a really cool company. Really nice guys.
Is there
Yeah.
anything else gear wise, new products or something that you're working on? Because I really want to dig into talking about some adventure stuff, but anything you want to
No,
tease from a
just
product standpoint?
yeah, actually. Okay, so I know it's kind of funny. I knew, like, I sort of knew you were going to ask that, and I have a different style. I am I overshare. I'm like an oversharer. So I'm always showing people what I'm working on and stuff, whereas that might not be like the best strategy. You know what I mean? But it's just part of the brand. The brand is just like a tinkerer. We do kind of neat, innovative stuff. So
Yeah.
we're doing silicone pot lids.
Oh yes,
Um,
I've seen this. Okay.
yeah, so we're now in our like prototype number 8 at this point, and that this is a good example of where this product comes from. So this is all I use. I use a 550 pot. I think that's pretty typical for, an ultralight backpacker. Even on my big expeditions, this is all I ever bring. And at night, whenever I want to have like a hot chocolate or something like that, or a soup, it gets hot and it burns your lips, and so then we were just playing with this, that you put this on. I need to actually do it down here. It's a little bit stretchy. And then now you've got a little area to
That's
hold it.
slick.
So these will be, yeah, yeah, and they're like stretchy a little bit. So you can put them on a little bit bigger pot or a little bit smaller pot. Um, we got that coming out end of summer probably,
Oh, cool.
which I'm kind of happy with. Which again is like, so it weighs like 10 grams. It weighs nothing, but maybe a traditional like through hiker wouldn't see that as a requirement. But it's just something that I was bothering me, so I kind of just made it, and now it'll be a product because everybody
Yeah.
loves it or everybody wants it. Yeah, and then I've got
Is it a strong enough
yep,
seal that you could leave your lid that comes with it on, and then you don't have to worry about like a sack or rubber bands or stuff to hold a stove and everything that you put into your cook kit? Like it's strong enough
yes.
to be that in your pack?
Yeah, so it is. It certainly is. It's almost, we had to play around with the diameter and
Okay.
the what they call the durometer, which is like the stretchiness or the softness of this. But I
Uh-huh.
mean, it's, well, there, I just popped it off. But it's like you'd have to have something pretty heavy inside it for it to pop off. So for me personally, actually, there's some comments on my post that I have where people are asking that exact question, like, can you actually get rid of the lid, and will that stay on? So for me, for sure. But all I ever have in my pot is usually a little ultralight windscreen, a little Esbit stove, and like a
Yeah.
sponge and a pot lifter. So it's pretty. If you were going to put something like a fuel canister, maybe a
Like in
fuel
a
canister would be too
750.
heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that would be a challenge. We'd have to do some tests, but I think, for the majority of people who keep a pot upright in their bag, um, it would stay on.
Cool.
So, and then yeah, we just did new tent stakes. These are um, 9 inches long, 1 gram per inch. So they're 9 grams. This is the thinnest titanium tube that I can source, like, in the world. I cannot get
That
thinner.
that looks
Thinner wall.
amazing.
Yeah, 1/4 inch with the pull loop and the aluminum head and just a plug on the end. So these will be an upgrade at the end of the year. I'm actually leaving on a trip this weekend, which we'll probably talk about. I'm bringing those to test it, and then you guys know this is my personal funky one. I think, have you ever seen that? So yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm working on we're working on this. I'm making the colors on the saws since I learned
is it
really like,
anodized or
it's not. It's actually an aluminum. It's basically like a very, very thin sticker. It's basically what it is.
okay.
It's a very, very thin, like, aluminum metal sticker. So we're trying our best. So it you can't really peel it off once it's on, um, but it's very hard to get on correctly. When I first did
Mm.
it, I thought, oh, this is great. It's going to take 2 seconds, and then I realized, ooh, this is a lot tougher than I thought. I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell these. So we're working on that, which is the Yuka 240 we came out with earlier this year. We've sold out 2 or 3 times in a row. Large batches. It's fantastic. Everyone's been so supportive, and we're just trying to make it a little bit more fun. I know
Nice.
the guys from Chris from Light AF. Every time he sees it or posts a picture, he's like, "Hey, what is that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's like his backpacks."
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So it's neat. That's what's on the horizon. I'm working on more. Like, there's a ton of stuff. It's because the company is really just me with some help in processing orders and operations and stuff. Like the
Gotcha.
design
Cool.
of stuff and the testing is mostly me. I'm kind of because I'm the person who actually goes out and uses it. My wife is the CFO, so if you're working with me and you get an invoice, that'll be from her.
Nice. Nice. That's
Yeah,
great. Small business doing fantastic things. I love it.
yeah.
Okay, let's dig into some adventure. And because I'm really interested in two specifically. One because it's very interesting to me from just like a personal standpoint. I come from a climbing background, and I'm talking about Baffin Island, which to me, like, it's on a bucket list place for me to go to. I've watched so many climbing films and some ski films as well from people going to Baffin Island, and it just looks like this incredible place that is super remote. I mean, you're close enough to Greenland, which Greenland is wildly crazy on its own. Like, but Baffin
Yeah.
Island just by itself, I want to go there. And so I watched your video about your trip to Baffin Island, and the first thing that comes to my mind is like, how do you plan a trip like that? So how do you execute something like that? Because even your Arctic canyons pack rafting trip, I'm skipping ahead. I'm just very
Yeah.
excited about this. But like, how do you put together something of that nature that is so remote, so wild in a sense, and make it happen? So like, that's the question, but also give some background on what that Baffin Island trip was.
So like everybody, as you do more and more trips, right, you just get more experience and you develop a muscle for um, that anxiety or fear of going on bigger and bigger trips. If someone told me to go on a 2 week hiking trip, I'd be like, okay, no problem. I got all the gear, I can do it next week. And if you told somebody who'd never been camping before, right, it would be the most horrifying experience of their life. Like they'd be anxiety like throughout their body and all that stuff. So I've done a lot of hiking, a lot of hiking over the years, certainly up until the mid 2000s. Even international, I've been hiking down all through South America. I've been to Patagonia many times, up to the Arctic, Iceland, even over did some big hikes over in China, Philippines, Portugal, and stuff like that. And I I started looking at maps, and um, I was wondering like how I could cross large waterways and things like that. And I got introduced to a pack raft, which you've bought now, and you're gonna
Hmm.
give it a go. But my plan was never to be any type of pack raft or a whitewater uh, paddler or anything, 10 or 11 years ago. And now when I look at a map, because it's been so many years, the only thing I think about is like, how can I connect these land routes to these water routes to make like a multi-sport unique route that
Hmm.
arguably couldn't be done without this type of equipment. So after I had, let's call it, graduated from like big hikes, let's say, I don't know if you want to call it, or you've just developed that muscle that you're looking for something a little bit more. Um, I grab a pull up, what do you call it, Google Earth. I know Canada. If you're not familiar with Canada, I'm not saying you aren't, but like if you look at Canada, it's huge. It's as big as like the United States and Canada. I don't know the actual land differences. I think we're a little bit bigger, but probably not by much. I could be wrong, but
Hmm.
We have no population, like other than along the border, really. I don't want to say no population because I don't want someone to watch this and think there's no one there. But there's
Yeah.
vast expanse of very, very remote wilderness. We're talking like thousands and thousands of miles. And so I spend time looking at all the different rivers and mountains and routes. And then I go online and I try and see if anyone's done them before, or if there's any information out there. And when Baffin Island came on my radar, I don't remember how I actually found it, but I was just looking, up in the Arctic. I'm always out looking up in the Arctic, and I
Hmm.
saw Mount Thor was there, which is like the tallest cliff face I think on the planet. It's just under, I want to say it's like just under a mile, maybe a little bit less. I think a
Yeah.
mile is
It's
1.6 kilometers.
insane how big it is.
It's
Just from the
crazy.
climbing films that I've seen of people traveling to go climb in
Yeah,
Baffin Island.
yeah. There's even a guy who has like a helicopter video on YouTube or something like that where he flies right over the top of Thor and looks down, and
Wow.
it's unbelievable. And at the time, I was getting more and more into whitewater paddling, and I saw that they have the Weasel River that runs right down in front of Thor, right down that valley. They call it the Valley of Giants because it's all just huge, huge sheer walls. And there was a professional kayaker named Eric Boomer. He lives in a Iqaluit. We're like kind of, I don't know, online buddies now, I guess we could call it.
Hmm.
He's a very, very strong paddler, like a borderline professional class 5 paddler. And he ran the Weasel River, and I sent him a note about doing it, and he kind of gave me some beta. And I emailed the park, and when I emailed the park and told them that I wanted to kayak the Weasel River, the park ranger said, I've been working here for 16 years, and I've never heard of anybody kayaking the Weasel River. So you just start putting the plan together. You plan a route, and boat shuttles here and there, flights. And I usually recommend if you want to do a big expedition on like a unique multi-sport route that is new. Maybe the hiking isn't new, and maybe the paddling isn't new, but the combination of the two, if you include climbing or biking or whatever, it's probably like a solid year, you know, to to put to put the whole thing together. Sometimes
Hmm.
getting permits for the parks is a little bit tough, getting flights and stuff like that can be a little bit tough. But yeah, that's how Baffin Island was, just finding on Google Earth gigantic canyon or gigantic mountains and seeing the valley and going, whoa. Yeah, and I've actually I put together like a guide, like almost like an informal guide of how to do a trip like that, and tons of people have used it to go to Baffin Island since. It's
Oh,
called
cool.
yeah. Oh, I don't want to say it wrong. Ayukshuk Pass, I think. Ayukshuk Pass, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
That valley.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
Man,
that's how
that sounds incredible. Just
you would
the
love
whole
it.
process, but also just the location.
The standing at the bottom of Thor, I'm guessing how tall is the like the walls in
Like
Yosemite?
Yosemite.
Yeah.
El Cap is in the 3,000 foot range.
Yeah, so imagine some it's not twice as high, but it is 1,000. No, it's probably about the same. It's obviously Thor's a little bit higher, but it's not significantly higher, you know.
In the like
It's
the 4,000 foot range.
yeah, it's probably like 35, 4,000 feet, somewhere around there. It's 1,200 meters times 1.6. I don't
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
You gotta go look it up or something like that. Oh no, that would be miles. So if you ever get a chance to go up there, highly recommend it. It's so gorgeous. It's mind blowing. Yeah, Canadian Arctic, unmatched.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so that leads into I think probably your most recent big trip is your Arctic Canyons solo pack rafting trip. That that stood out to me as just I don't know, maybe a little bit of insanity.
Oh,
I'm not going to call you
yeah.
insane, but watching it, it's like there's so much that could go wrong here, but also what an experience that very few people are going to have. And I think that's part of like what we love as outdoor adventurers is there's a good population of us that want to experience something on a solo level that is kind of it's our experience and ours alone, and not to be shared with like a bunch of people. Share what that trip was and what that experience was like, because I think it's something that I feel like anybody that's listening to this podcast should go and watch that series. In fact, I'll link it in the description. But anyway, I'll let you I'll let you share.
Yeah. So that trip was the result again of a Google Earth kind of zooming in and out of the Arctic regions of Canada. And Canada, like I said, is populated mostly along the southern border, let's call it. That's where the majority of the population is. But then you have Alaska up on the west side, right? And up there you've got this gateway to all these northern parks and stuff like that. But when you go east to, let's call it Baffin Island, there's this area here, Northwest Territories and Nunavut. They're provinces and territories of our of Canada. They're sparsely populated. There's basically small Inuit communities along there and stuff like that, and rarely visited. Handful of people might be up there doing some kind of trip each year. And I came across this canyon. I found this canyon just like zooming in and out, and I
Hmm.
saw that the name of the river was called the Hornaday River. So I looked it up online, and it's definitely a very remote river. It's a fly-in type of trip, and people canoe the Hornaday River, and they stop and they get picked up by a float plane prior to the canyons. There's about a 60-kilometer long-ish canyon. It's unbelievable. It will absolutely melt your mind if you ever go visit it. So I sent a note off to the park, and I said the park was called Tuk Tuk Nogait, which I think means young caribou. I think that's what it means.
Okay.
And the park is developed. There's the Blue Nose West herd. The Blue Nose West caribou herd is in that park. There's 20,000 of them, and the park was designed to protect them and allow
Hmm.
the locals to hunt and stuff like that. So I sent a note off to the park, and the park ranger was very helpful and said, he'll get back to me if he knows anybody that's ever paddled it. And he came back and he said someone paddled it in 1999. A guy named Eric Beaudry and Gilbert Wall. I think their names are both professional guides and kayakers. And they wrote a report for Parks Canada. And the report basically said, you can't have people kayak this canyon. It's like too crazy is really what it is. I think there was the liability. It's actually not a crazy whitewater canyon, but just so remote, so remote, and you can get yourself in trouble with flash floods and a lot of like predators and alpha animals out there and stuff like that. But so I worked with the park for 2 years almost to put a route together, and I think so. The plan very much was I was going to fly to a small community called Pawatuck, which is on the Arctic Ocean, and I was going to walk 100 kilometers to the gates of the canyon. And
Hmm.
while I was walking the gates of the canyon, I would map it for the park. So I'd build a map of the park and let them know like where all the rapids are and everything. And that was really the plan. It was going to be like a 12 or 14-day trip. And then a couple of days just before I was leaving for the trip, and you have to understand when you're going to these parks, I was the only permit in 2023. Only one visitor permit was issued, and I got it. So I was the only visitor to the park. There was no other, like no one else even applied, I don't think.
Really?
So they had a maintenance flight going in, and they offered to fly me in to a lake that was only 20 kilometers from the gates of the canyon, the first canyon. So a couple days before my trip, I changed my plan a little bit. I flew in, and I went with the opinion that I would hike to the gates of the canyon. I hadn't scouted any of it, and I would just, if I couldn't paddle it, I would map them as best I could, give the map to the park, and say, get someone else to paddle this stuff. It's out of
Hmm.
my league. So you'll see if you ever watch it. I mean, it's pretty obvious to see when you actually can't get back upstream. But in the very, very tight canyons, some of it they call it Pinball Canyon, has big class fours and class fives through that. It's just a couple meters wide with several 100-foot cliffs. As soon as there's no portage, let's call it, to get back up river, I wouldn't run the rapid. I would exit the canyon and then go back down into the canyon later on. Now that only ended up being the case, I think twice. I think only twice I had to exit the canyon. But it took me, I think it was 4 or 5 days to do, no, maybe 6 days to do the canyon in total and map it. And I paddled because I'm such a nerd. I paddled like 84.3% of the rapids. So I counted all the rapids, you know, just seeing like,
It
hey,
did the
what did I
math.
do? Yeah, I did the math, just like, did I even do any of this? And it's the experience of being there. The animals don't even know what a human being is. The caribou were so interested and curious with me that if you ever see it, and it's tough to film, right? You're on this big expedition, you got a ton of gear, and it's
Right.
not like I have a good camera or a good microphone. I just have a GoPro. That's all I have, right? But man, they're just really interested in you. There's no fear. They come right up to you, swimming in the rapids in front of me. Even a wolf, I had a wolf come to my tent. I have great video of it in the middle of the night. Didn't even care about me. Like
Yeah.
they just like,
Yeah.
what are you? Like, what are you? And I'm like, what are you?
You
Yeah.
want to be
So
buddies?
yeah,
Keep you
like
warm?
they're just not. Um, in Ontario, everybody is always mentioning, "Hey, Steve, aren't you ever afraid of bears?" But and sure, I definitely have to respect them.
Yeah.
We have black bears here, not grizzly bears in Ontario. But my experience has been that they are pretty skittish and they'll run away at the first sign of human noise. As a matter of fact, if you just like clap your hands, it's almost like a raccoon. It'll just like you couldn't chase it and catch it if you wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
Whereas
pretty docile.
a few, yeah, you know what I mean? And certainly there's been altercations and stuff like that. So I don't want to take away from the respect that you have to give them. But I feel like I could have rode one of the caribous like when I was up there. Like, I mean, it was crazy. Yeah. Yeah. When they were coming into camp, I was leaving, like I was openly backing away and climbing up rocks and just letting them have at my gear. Like, not that they were doing anything, but they just were like, they walked right over my pack raft. Like, they didn't even care.
That's, uh,
Yeah.
I'm
Very
jealous.
special
I'm jealous.
experience, man. Very,
Yeah.
very, very special. Yeah. So, and that's how that trip went. And then the only thing I would say is when I do these trips, like, I'm prepared to walk the entire time. Like on the Hornaday Canyons when I went, I'm not, um, I'm not in a position like to like throw myself down like big white water just to like make a video or something. I'm going to go there. I want to visit. If it means that that everything is above my skill level, whether that's climbing in and out of the canyons or paddling, I'm cool just to do like a beautiful rim hike for a week. It's gorgeous. So I think part of the strategy of going on these types of trips is being quite open to a change in itinerary
Yeah.
at the last minute kind of thing.
I think that's smart risk assessment,
Yeah.
especially from a solo standpoint.
Oh,
You're
totally.
not going to
Yeah.
put yourself in a position that is going to get you hurt. You're just assessing all of those risk opportunities and then making your decision around that. I respect that a lot.
Yeah. A little bit calculated, I guess.
Man, what a cool experience. And seriously, for everybody listening, if you haven't watched those videos, you go to the description when you're done listening and go watch binge them. It's a really good series of adventure. So what have you got coming up? Because you're headed out for the next little bit. I When we talked last time, there was a potential curveball that was in
Yeah.
play. Has the curveball been straightened out, or
Yeah, it got straightened
what's
out this
going on there?
morning. Excuse me. We are going to what's called the Torngat Mountains. That's on the border of Quebec and Labrador. So for you guys who are looking at a map, you're going to go right above, let's call it New York, all the way up above Quebec. There's a small peninsula. They actually did a season of Alone there, that Alone survival season.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they did it in Labrador. I don't know where they did it, but in that Labrador area. So as you have the Labrador Sea on one side, you have Ungava Bay on the other, and it goes into a point in Quebec and Labrador there. There is a river there called the Carac River, and there's a tributary called the Andre Grenier. And the Andre Grenier is an unmapped river. So we are going to we fly in actually on Sunday. Today is Tuesday.
Tuesday.
And
Yep.
yeah, so we spent 8 months planning this. We fly in from a town called Kuujjuaq, which is a northern community, into the Upper Karak on a twin otter. We paddle the Upper Croc, then we do a 2 day, let's call it 30-mile alpine traverse over the Torngat Mountains to reach the headwaters of the Andre Grenier. We take 3 days mapping and paddling the Andre Grenier, which is, I would call it an advanced river. My expedition partner is a class 5 paddler.
Hmm.
Like he can run anything. I doubt I'll be able to run everything, but I'll be able to map it. So it's no big deal for me. I'll take some good video of him going over waterfalls and whatever else he wants to do. And we'll meet back up with the Karak and head out. And a week ago, um, the person that was coming with me unfortunately was rock climbing and fell and fractured their ankle. I think it was less than a week ago, I guess. And so he
Oh,
canceled. I was going to go on the trip solo, and I had a friend's wife actually reach out to me and say, "Hey, man, are you like looking for somebody?" And I was like, "Well, we're leaving in 6 days. What are the chances of someone joining a 3 week
yeah.
expedition to the
Right.
subarctic rivers? Like, I mean, sure, if you can make it." She goes, "I'll talk to my husband, Ryan." And Ryan's a kayak. He's actually my kayak instructor. So I met him a decade ago. He taught me all my whitewater like paddling. Even still, I still take lessons now.
Oh, cool.
So he just joined as of this morning. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Like actually 6 hours ago, he booked his flight to meet me in Kujawak, and then we're
Wow.
off on Monday.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So I'll
mean,
be back.
it's not amazing for the friend that has the injury and having to miss
No,
out on the experience. That's awful. It's crazy with climbing how fast you can go from 100 to 0 and be out for so long. I've seen so many people get injured from climbing accidents, so that's really a bummer.
it's
And
it's definitely yeah, it's definitely tough for him. I feel bad even if he watches this actually, but I've been reaching out to him, and we've got another huge trip planned for next year. So we're just starting that trip, just starting the planning process, like reaching out to some communities and stuff to see
mm,
what's been done. And again, it's always these multi-sport routes that I like to put together where the and just to touch base on the pack raft, like the pack raft is not, I've told you this before, it's not a replacement for a canoe or a kayak.
sure,
It really comes in, it's a tool for the toolbox. And if you want to reach remote rivers where arguably you would never be able to bring a craft to unless you helicoptered it in, let's say, and your budget was extremely large, the pack raft is just an awesome piece of equipment for those type of trips.
yeah, and
Yeah.
reliable too. I mean
Oh,
the
yeah,
companies that are making pack rafts, they're phenomenally constructed and just super reliable and really good tools. So
I'm
it's
surprised. I have a lot of people ask about how durable they are, and you understand, like I don't really know much about the construction of them. I don't even. I'm not really like a soft goods or materials expert.
hmm
They're just super durable. I have no idea how they
yeah,
do it. They just. I I really. I mean, short of a sharp stick, like actually, let's call it like spearing it or something.
right.
But rockwise, like my I just actually just got a new one for this trip, but my old one, who Ryan is going to use now, I bought that for Baffin Island. That was the first trip I did with it in Baffin Island.
Oh, cool.
That was six years ago. I did like multiple Arctic rivers. It's been down to Patagonia, over to Europe. Yeah, all kinds of rivers, and it's just fine. I don't
Man.
know.
just
Yeah, yeah. So
just
I
out
mean,
having a good time. I love it.
yeah,
It's amazing.
doing something right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, I hope it's an amazing trip for you, and maybe this will come out while you're still out. And but yeah, hope you're safe and just have a good time and accomplish your goals. And hopefully we'll see a video as well from it.
yeah, I release less videos. So the YouTube channel really is now like me explaining gear, or me showing trips I go on, which is,
Hmm.
you probably get 6 or 7. How often are you releasing videos now?
Twice a week.
Once a week. Yeah. So you've got a schedule with like
Yeah.
the next 10 planned. Yeah, yeah, no,
Yeah.
totally get it. It's a business, right?
Yeah.
Mine is
Yeah.
like if you subscribe to my channel, and this is good for your viewers, subscribe to my channel, you might not see a video for 4 months.
Well, is there anything that you want to share to kind of wrap up here? Any parting thoughts? Maybe where people can find you, follow you, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, so the website, obviously Suluk46.com is you can check out there. That will have all the products and also all the adventures that I kind of go on. Same with the YouTube and Instagram, social media kind of stuff. Pretty
Cool.
easy to find. I guess the only thing that would be worth mentioning is it's if you have any questions about the gear that I have, it's always better to contact me. I'm definitely not someone who believes in the fact that my gear is for everybody. I'll get a lot of
Mm,
people asking about some of the non-traditional like saws and tables. They'll say, I'm going to go do this trip with these people. Is this a good fit? And I'll say, you know what, it's probably not. You might need something a little bit bigger or whatnot. So if there's
sure.
ever any questions, it's always best just to shoot me an email first. You know,
Awesome.
yeah, I've used the stuff enough that I know when it's a good fit.
Yeah, and I think that's important. If there is one takeaway to kind of wrap this up that is an important part of the whole discussion is tying in the adventures, is knowing that you are out in the field testing the gear that you're producing, but it's also what's driving the innovation opportunity.
Mhm.
And I think that that's pretty, I shouldn't say it's rare because outdoor industry folks use the gear that they're wanting to share with people for them to use out in the field, but the level of testing that takes place and just like, I don't know, kind of the intensity of it, maybe that's the rarer side of things. And to be out for 3 weeks at a time and using something for that duration versus a 2 night trip, that makes a difference, I think, in the approach to, okay, this had hard use for this amount of time. I need to beef it up and make it better for some really hard use. Kind
Mhm.
of generalizing, but I think that that's an important takeaway from the whole conversation with you here today.
I think in the cottage industry, generally, when you're dealing with super ultralight stuff or whatever, there may, I'm not saying there is, there may be some drawbacks in terms of like durability or
Hmm.
areas of use. If you were going to go and climb Mount Everest, you might not want to take a trekking pole DCF tent. And I think that
Right.
people maybe in similar positions as me, where you kind of have the person who started the company still going on camping trips, they'll be pretty open to tell you like that doesn't sound like a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I like it.
yeah.
Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks for your time. Good luck on your trip coming up. And yeah, we'll chat soon.
Thanks, Devin. I had a really good time.